What if the people you loved most in the world stabbed you in the heart with just 5 little words? Margaret Chen sat in her favorite blue chair, the one with the soft cushions that helped her old bones feel better. At 71 years old, she had learned to find comfort in small things. But today, her heart was dancing with excitement like a little girl's on Christmas morning. She picked up her phone and dialed Danny's number. Danny was her only son, her pride and joy, her whole world wrapped up in one person. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello. Danny's voice sounded tired, maybe a little annoyed. Hi, sweetheart. Margaret's voice sparkled with happiness. I was just thinking about the wedding plans. Have you and Sarah picked a date yet? I can't wait to help you plan everything. There was a long, scary silence on the other end. The kind of silence that makes your stomach feel like it's falling down a deep, dark hole. Mom. Danny's voice was strange, different, cold. Yes, honey. What's wrong? Margaret's heart started beating faster, like a bird trapped in a cage. Then Sarah's voice came on the phone. Sarah, her daughter-in-law, who Margaret had loved like her own daughter. But Sarah's voice was like ice cubes dropping into Margaret's warm heart. We got married yesterday. 5 words. Just 5 little words that felt like 1,000 knives. Margaret's phone almost slipped from her shaking hands. What did you say? You heard me, Sarah said, her voice as cold as winter wind. We had our wedding yesterday. It was beautiful. Perfect, actually. But Margaret's voice came out as a whisper. Why wasn't I invited? I'm Danny's mother. I'm family. Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that makes you feel small and stupid. Oh, Margaret. The wedding was only for special people. You know, people who really matter to us. The words hit Margaret like a truck. Special people. She wasn't special enough for her own son's wedding. Danny. Margaret called out, hoping her son would say something, anything, to make this horrible dream go away. Danny, please tell me this isn't true. Mom, Sarah's right, Danny said, and his words were quiet but they cut deep. We wanted a small wedding. Just for the people we really wanted there. Margaret felt like she was drowning. The room started spinning around her. She gripped the arm of her blue chair so tight her knuckles turned white. I don't understand, she whispered. I've been asking about the wedding for months. I offered to help pay for it. I offered to help plan it. I bought a beautiful dress and... We didn't need your help, Sarah cut her off. We had everything under control. That's when it hit Margaret like lightning. All the money. All the time she had opened her wallet, her heart, her savings account for Danny and Sarah. 3 years ago, when they couldn't pay rent. Just this once, Mom. We'll pay you back. 2 years ago, when they needed furniture. We're just starting out, Mom. Family helps family. Last year, when Sarah lost her job. It's temporary, Mom. Just until we get back on our feet. Every month, every emergency, every just this once that turned into forever. Margaret's mind started adding up numbers like a calculator gone crazy. The rent money she sent every month. $1,200. For 3 years. That was over $43,000 just for rent. Then the furniture money. $5,000 for their couch, their bed, their dining table. The car repair. $3,000 when Sarah crashed her car. The credit card bills she paid. $8,000 when they got in a little trouble. The grocery money, the electric bills, the phone bills, the emergency money that came up every few weeks. Margaret's heart pounded as the numbers grew bigger and bigger in her head. Over $60,000. $60,000 of her retirement money, her social security, her savings that were supposed to last her the rest of her life. Mom, are you still there? Danny's voice sounded far away. Margaret was still there, but she felt like she was floating outside her body, watching this horrible movie happen to someone else. I gave you everything, she said, her voice getting stronger. I gave you my money, my time, my love. I cancelled my own vacation to pay your rent. I ate cheap soup for dinner so I could send you grocery money. I gave you everything. Well, Sarah's voice came back sharp and mean. That was your choice. We never forced you to do anything. But I'm not special enough for your wedding? Margaret asked, and now her voice was shaking with something new. Not sadness anymore. Something hotter. Something that burned. Look, Margaret, Sarah said, using the tone you use when talking to a small child. It's done now. The wedding happened. It was perfect without all the drama you would have brought. Drama. Drama? Margaret had never caused drama in her life. She was the peacekeeper, the helper, the one who always said yes and never complained. She was the one who sent money without asking questions. She was the one who loved without limits. I have to go, Margaret said quietly. Mom, don't be upset, Danny said, but his voice sounded fake, like he was reading from a script. Maybe we can have a little party later or something. A little party. Later. Maybe. Margaret hung up the phone. She sat in her blue chair in complete silence. The house felt different now, like all the air had been sucked out of it. The pictures on her walls, all those pictures of Danny growing up, of family holidays, of happy times, they all looked different now too. Like lies. Outside her window, the world kept going. Cars drove by. People walked their dogs. Children played in their yards. But inside Margaret's house, everything had stopped. She wasn't special enough. After $60,000 and 3 years of sacrifice, after loving them more than she loved herself, after giving them everything she had, she wasn't special enough. Margaret closed her eyes and felt something growing inside her chest. Something she had never felt before. It was hot and strong and it made her hands shake, but not from sadness anymore. It was anger. Pure, burning, powerful anger. And for the first time in her 71 years of life, Margaret Chen was about to get mad. That night, Margaret didn't sleep. Not even for 1 minute. She sat at her kitchen table with a pen, a calculator, and a stack of papers that grew taller as the hours passed. Bank statements. Credit card bills. Receipts she had saved in a shoebox marked, Danny's help money. The numbers were worse than she thought. Much, much worse. Margaret's fingers moved across the calculator keys like she was playing piano, but this music was scary and sad. Click, click, click. Add, add, add. Rent money for 3 years. $43,200. Furniture, $8,500. She found more receipts. Car repairs, $4,800. Danny's car broke down too. Emergency money, $12,300. So many emergencies. Groceries, $6,200. They were always between paychecks. Credit card payments, $11,000, higher than she remembered. Medical bills when Sarah couldn't afford her medicine, $3,400. Christmas and birthday gifts for 3 years, $2,800. Small loans that were never paid back, $7,300. The final number made Margaret's heart stop. $99,500. Almost $100,000. Her life savings. Her security. Her future. All gone to 2 people who didn't think she was special enough for their wedding. Margaret stared at that number until her eyes burned. $99,500. That was more money than most people made in 2 whole years of working. She could have bought a new car. She could have traveled around the world. She could have fixed her old house, bought new clothes, eaten at fancy restaurants every single day. Instead, she ate soup from cans and wore the same 3 dresses over and over again while Danny and Sarah lived like rich people with her money. As the sun started to come up, Margaret felt something changing inside her chest. The sadness was still there, but it was getting pushed aside by something stronger. Something that made her spine straighten and her jaw get tight. She was done being the fool. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, Margaret called her bank. "Hello, this is Margaret Chen. I need to cancel some automatic transfers right now." "Of course, Mrs. Chen. Which transfers would you like to cancel?" "All of them. Every single automatic payment going to Daniel Chen or Sarah Chen. Cancel them today." "Ma'am, are you sure? These payments have been going on for years. If you cancel them suddenly—" "I'm very sure," Margaret said, and her voice was like steel. "Cancel them all. Right now." Next, she called the bank again and asked them to remove Danny and Sarah from her accounts completely. They had been able to see her bank information for emergencies. Well, the emergency was over. Then Margaret did something that felt like jumping out of an airplane. She changed her phone number. For 71 years, Margaret had been the kind of person who never wanted to hurt anybody's feelings. She always said yes when people needed help. She always put other people first, even when it made her life harder. But sitting in her kitchen, looking at that pile of receipts and that horrible number, Margaret felt like she was meeting herself for the first time. The real Margaret. The one who didn't have to be nice to people who were mean to her. The one who could say, "No," in big, bold letters. At 10:30 that morning, Margaret's old phone, the one she hadn't thrown away yet, started ringing. She looked at the screen. Danny. She let it ring. Ring, ring, ring. Then it stopped. 2 minutes later, it started again. This time it was Sarah. Margaret watched the phone ring and felt something amazing. She felt powerful. Ring, ring, ring. Stop. Then Danny again. Then Sarah. Then Danny. Then Sarah. By lunchtime, they had called 47 times. Margaret made herself a nice sandwich with the expensive cheese she usually saved for special occasions. Today felt pretty special. It was the first day of her new life. At 2:15, someone started pounding on her front door. Bang, 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 bang. Open the door. It was Danny, and he sounded panicked. Good. Bang, bang, bang. Margaret. We know you're in there. That was Sarah, and she sounded angry. Even better. Margaret sat in her blue chair and took another bite of her sandwich. Let them bang. Let them yell. Let them stand outside like beggars asking for money. Because that's exactly what they were. The rent didn't go through. Danny shouted through the door. The landlord is calling US. Why didn't the money go through? Margaret smiled. It was the first real smile she'd had in 3 years. There's something wrong with the bank. The automatic payment didn't work. Oh, it worked perfectly, Margaret thought. It worked exactly the way she wanted it to. The pounding got louder. More desperate. Margaret, stop being childish and open this door. Childish. Childish. Margaret stood up from her chair and walked to the door. But she didn't open it. Go away, she said in a clear, strong voice. The pounding stopped. Everything got quiet. Mom. Danny's voice was smaller now. What's wrong? Why are you acting like this? I'm not special enough to be at your wedding, Margaret said through the door. So you're not special enough to get my money anymore. Mom, come on. Don't be ridiculous. Open the door and we'll talk about this like adults. Adults. Margaret's voice got louder. Adults don't lie to people who love them. Adults don't take money from their mother for 3 years and then exclude her from the most important day of their lives. Adults don't call someone not special after taking $99,000 from them. Silence. Complete, total silence. Then Sarah's voice, shaky and scared. 99,000? That's not right. It wasn't that much. I counted every penny, Margaret said. Every receipt. Every bank statement. $99,500. That's how much you took from me while planning a wedding I wasn't good enough to attend. She heard whispering on the other side of the door. Worried. Frantic whispering. "Mom, please," Danny said, and now he sounded like he was crying. "We need that rent money. The landlord says if we don't pay by tomorrow, we're getting evicted." Margaret felt a tiny bit of her old self trying to worry about Danny. The part that wanted to rush to help, to fix everything, to make everyone happy. But then she remembered Sarah's cold voice. Only special people were invited. "You should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't family," Margaret said. More whispering. Then footsteps going away from the door. Margaret peeked out her window and watched Danny and Sarah get into their car. The car she had helped pay for. They sat there for a long time, probably making phone calls, probably trying to figure out how to get money from someone else. Good luck with that, Margaret thought. As she watched them drive away, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt free. No more automatic payments. No more emergency phone calls. No more choosing between her own groceries and their rent money. But as the day turned into evening, Margaret started to feel a little scared. Danny and Sarah weren't going to just give up. People who take almost $100,000 from someone don't just walk away when the money stops coming. They would be back. And next time, they would probably bring help. Margaret had won the first battle, but she had a feeling the war was just getting started. Margaret thinks she's won, but Danny and Sarah have a shocking plan that will make your blood run cold. What happens when they decide to fight dirty? The answer will leave you speechless. 3 days later, Margaret was watering her flowers when she heard car doors slamming in her driveway. Not one car. 2 cars. She peeked through her curtains and her heart started racing like a rabbit running from a wolf. Danny and Sarah were walking toward her house, but they weren't alone. A man in a fancy suit was with them, carrying a thick briefcase and looking very serious. Behind them came a woman with a clipboard and a badge hanging from her neck. Margaret's hands started shaking. This looked like trouble. Big trouble. Knock, knock, knock. This time it wasn't angry pounding. It was the kind of knocking that meant business. The kind that made you think of police and courts and very bad news. "Mrs. Chen," the man in the suit called out. "My name is Mr. Stevens. I'm a lawyer. We need to speak with you about some concerns regarding your mental health." Mental health? Mental health? Margaret felt like someone had thrown ice water all over her body. They were trying to say she was crazy. They wanted people to think her brain was broken so they could take her money. "Go away," Margaret shouted through the door. "I don't want to talk to you." "Mrs. Chin, I understand you've been making some very strange financial decisions lately," the lawyer said in a smooth, fake-friendly voice. "Your son and daughter-in-law are worried about you. They think you might be confused." Confused. She had never been less confused in her entire life. "We're not going away until you open this door," Sarah's voice cut through the air like a knife. "We're here to help you, Margaret. Whether you want help or not." Margaret ran to her phone and called the first number she could think of. Mrs. Patterson, her neighbor, who was 82 and tougher than old leather. "Dorothy, I need help," Margaret whispered into the phone. "There are people at my door trying to say I'm crazy. They want to take my money." "Don't you dare open that door," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice sharp as a sword. "I'm calling my grandson. He's a lawyer. Don't sign anything, don't say anything, and don't let them in your house." Knock, knock, knock. "Mrs. Chin, we can do this the easy way or the hard way," the lawyer said, and now his voice wasn't friendly anymore. "But we will be speaking with you today." Margaret's doorbell started ringing over and over again. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Then more knocking. Then Danny's voice, fake crying. "Mom, please. We're just worried about you. You're acting so weird. This isn't like you. Weird. Weird." It wasn't weird to stop letting people steal from you. Margaret looked out her window and saw neighbors starting to come outside to see what all the noise was about. Mrs. Patterson was marching across the street in her house slippers, looking like she was ready for war. The woman with the clipboard was writing things down and taking pictures of Margaret's house. That made Margaret's stomach feel sick with worry. 20 minutes later, another car pulled up. A young man in a different suit got out and walked straight to Margaret's door. "Mrs. Chen? I'm David Patterson, Dorothy's grandson. I'm your lawyer now. Don't open this door for anyone but me." Margaret opened the door just a crack and let David inside, then locked it quickly behind him. David was tall and had kind eyes, but his face looked angry when Margaret told him what was happening. "They can't force their way into your house," he said. "They can't make you take mental health tests you don't want. And they definitely can't take control of your money just because they say you're confused." "But what if they convince people I'm crazy?" Margaret asked, her voice small and scared. "Are you crazy?" David asked with a little smile. "No," Margaret said. "I'm the most sane I've ever been. I figured out they were using me and I stopped it." "Then we'll prove that," David said. "But Margaret, I need to warn you. They're going to try everything to get your money back. They might bring social workers to your house. They might try to get you declared incompetent. This is going to be a fight." Outside, the knocking had stopped, but Margaret could see through her window that all the cars were still there. They were waiting, planning, plotting. "What do I do?" Margaret asked. "First, we document everything," David said, pulling out his phone. "Every conversation, every visit, every threat. Second, we get you evaluated by a doctor who will confirm you're perfectly fine. Third, we prepare to go to court if we have to." Margaret felt scared but also excited. She was going to fight back. Really fight back. David went outside to talk to the lawyer and the social worker. Margaret watched through her window as he stood tall and strong, using big hand gestures and pointing at papers. After a few minutes, the social worker left. But Danny, Sarah, and their lawyer stayed. David came back inside. "The social worker was here because Danny and Sarah reported you as a vulnerable adult who might be making bad decisions with money. I told her that cutting off financial support to ungrateful children is actually a very smart decision." Margaret almost laughed, but she was still too scared. "The lawyer wants to schedule a meeting to discuss guardianship," David continued. "That means they want to take control of all your money and decisions. They want to be in charge of your life. Can they do that?" Margaret whispered. "Not if you're mentally competent. And Margaret, from everything you've told me, you're not just competent, you're brilliant. You figured out you were being taken advantage of and you stopped it. That's exactly what a smart person would do." Over the next 2 hours, Margaret watched from her window as Danny, Sarah, and their lawyer had heated conversations in her driveway. Sometimes Danny would point at the house and shake his head. Sometimes Sarah would throw her hands up in the air like she was angry. The lawyer kept checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. Finally, David's phone rang. "They want to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m., he said after hanging up. "Neutral location, the community center. They're bringing their doctor who will say you're incompetent. We're bringing our doctor who will say you're fine. Will I have to answer questions?" Margaret asked. "Yes, but I'll be right there with you. And Margaret, remember, you're not the one who did something wrong. They are. They took almost $100,000 from you and then treated you like garbage. You're the victim here, not the villain." That night, Margaret couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't because she was sad or angry. It was because she was preparing for battle. She practiced answering questions in the mirror. "Why did you stop sending money to your son?" "Because I realized they were using me and excluding me from their lives while taking my money." "Do you understand how much money you gave them?" $99,500. Every penny is documented. "Are you angry with them?" "I'm not angry. I'm done being their personal bank account." Margaret looked at herself in the mirror and saw something amazing. She saw a strong woman. A smart woman. A woman who wasn't going to be pushed around anymore. Tomorrow, Danny and Sarah and their fancy lawyer were going to try to convince people that she was crazy. But Margaret Chen had news for them. She had never been more sane in her life. And she was about to prove it. The courtroom showdown is coming. Will Margaret's own son succeed in stealing her freedom and her money? The next 24 hours will change everything. Margaret woke up at 5 a.m. on the day that would change everything forever. She put on her best dress, the navy blue one with tiny flowers that made her feel strong and beautiful. She did her hair carefully and put on the pearl earrings her mother had given her 50 years ago. If she was going to fight for her life, she was going to look like the dignified lady she truly was. At exactly 1:45 p.m., David picked her up in his car. "Remember, Margaret," he said as they drove to the community center, "you're not on trial here. They are. You have nothing to be ashamed of." But when they walked into the meeting room, Margaret felt like she was walking into a lion's den. Danny and Sarah sat at a big table with their fancy lawyer, Mr. Stevens. Next to them was a woman in a white coat with a briefcase full of papers. Across from them sat Judge Morrison, a kind-looking woman with silver hair who would decide Margaret's fate. And in the corner sat a man with a notebook who David whispered was the court reporter, the person who would write down every single word that was said. Margaret's legs felt like jelly, but she sat down next to David and lifted her chin high. She was ready. "Let's begin," Judge Morrison said. "Mr. Stevens, you claim that Mrs. Chen is not mentally competent to handle her own finances. Please present your evidence." Mr. Stevens stood up and opened a folder thick with papers. "Your Honor, Mrs. Chen has displayed erratic and irrational behavior. She suddenly cut off all financial support to her son and daughter-in-law without warning or explanation. She's become hostile and refuses to communicate with her family. These are classic signs of dementia or mental illness." Margaret wanted to jump up and scream, but David squeezed her hand gently. "Let him finish," he whispered. "Then it's our turn. Furthermore," Mr. Stevens continued, "Mrs. Chen has been giving away large sums of money for years, showing poor financial judgment. She needs a guardian to protect her from making more bad decisions." The woman in the white coat stood up next. "I'm Dr. Williams, and based on the family's reports, I believe Mrs. Chen is suffering from age-related cognitive decline. I recommend immediate guardianship for her own protection." Judge Morrison looked at Margaret with curious eyes. "Mrs. Chen, how do you respond to these claims?" Margaret stood up slowly. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears, but her voice came out clear and strong. "Your Honor, I am not crazy. I am not sick. I am a woman who finally woke up." She opened her purse and pulled out a thick folder of her own. "For 3 years, I gave my son and daughter-in-law $99,500. Here are the bank statements, the receipts, and the records of every penny." Judge Morrison's eyebrows went up. "That's a significant amount of money." "Yes, it is," Margaret said, getting stronger with every word. "I gave them this money because I loved them. I sacrificed my own comfort, my own security, my own future because I believed family should help family." Danny started to say something, but Judge Morrison held up her hand for silence. Margaret continued, "3 days ago, I called to ask about their wedding plans. That's when I learned they had gotten married the day before. When I asked why I wasn't invited, Sarah told me the wedding was only for special people. She said I wasn't special enough to be there." The room got very, very quiet. After giving them almost $100,000, after choosing their needs over my own needs for 3 years, I wasn't special enough for their wedding. Margaret's voice started to shake, but not from fear, from pure, righteous anger. "So I made a decision. A very sane, very smart decision. I stopped being their personal bank account." Judge Morrison leaned forward. "And that's when they brought these concerns about your mental health?" "That's exactly right," David said, standing up. "Your Honor, we have our own evaluation." He handed papers to the judge. "Dr. Martinez examined Mrs. Chen yesterday. She scored perfectly on every cognitive test. Her memory is excellent, her reasoning is sound, and her decision-making is completely rational. Dr. Martinez, a gentle man with kind eyes, stood up from the back of the room. Your Honor, Mrs. Chen is one of the most mentally sharp 71-year-old women I've ever evaluated. Cutting off financial support to people who were taking advantage of her shows excellent judgment, not poor judgment. Danny finally couldn't stay quiet anymore. Mom, you're being ridiculous. We never took advantage of you. We always planned to pay you back. Margaret turned to look at her son, really look at him, for the first time in years. Danny, she said sadly, in 3 years, you never paid back even $1. In 3 years, you never said, thank you, even once. And when it came time for the most important day of your life, you decided I wasn't good enough to be there. Sarah jumped up from her chair. You're being dramatic. It was just a small wedding. Small enough to exclude your husband's mother, Judge Morrison said quietly, but not too small to accept nearly $100,000 from her. The judge looked through all the papers, asked Margaret several questions about dates and numbers, and watched how she answered. Margaret felt like she was taking the most important test of her life, but she wasn't scared anymore. She was telling the truth, and the truth was powerful. After 2 hours, Judge Morrison made her decision. I find no evidence whatsoever that Mrs. Chan is mentally incompetent. Her decision to stop financial support appears to be a reasonable response to being excluded and taken advantage of. The petition for guardianship is denied. Margaret felt like she could fly. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into potential elder financial abuse. Taking nearly $100,000 from an elderly person and then attempting to have them declared incompetent when they stop giving money is a serious matter. Danny and Sarah's faces went white as sheets. Mr. Stevens quickly packed up his papers. Your Honor, my clients were simply concerned about. Your clients, Judge Morrison said in a voice like ice, were concerned about money, not Mrs. Chen's well-being. This case is closed. As everyone filed out of the room, Danny tried one last time to talk to Margaret. Mom, please. We can work this out. We can. No, Danny, Margaret said, and her voice was calm and peaceful. We can't work this out. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now I'm making mine. 6 months later, Margaret sold her old house and moved into a beautiful apartment in a senior community where she quickly made friends with other strong, independent women. Some of them had stories just like hers, children who had taken advantage of their love and generosity. Margaret started leading a support group called Second Chances for older adults who had been financially abused by family members. She taught them how to set boundaries, how to say no, and how to reclaim their power. Danny and Sarah's investigation resulted in them having to pay heavy fines for elder abuse. They lost their apartment when they couldn't make rent without Margaret's money, and they had to move back in with Sarah's parents. Margaret never got her money back, but she got something better. She got herself back. Every morning, Margaret looked in the mirror and said, "Good morning, you special, special woman." Because she finally understood the truth. She had always been special. She had always been worthy. She had always deserved better. And now, for the first time in her 71 years, she was living like it. Margaret Chen had learned the most important lesson of her life. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who respect you the least. And when you finally stop accepting less than you deserve, that's not when your life ends. That's when your life begins. Did Margaret's incredible journey inspire you? Then please, smash that like button if this story moved your heart. Share this story with anyone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more amazing true stories about courage, justice, and second chances. Comment below. Have you ever had to cut toxic people out of your life? Share your story. Your courage might inspire someone else. Remember, you are special. You are worthy. And you deserve people in your life who treat you like the treasure you are.